It started as a normal evening. I had just finished tidying up my living room, the faint smell of jasmine lingering from the candles I always kept lit. I was enjoying a rare quiet moment, curled up on the sofa with a cup of tea, when I heard the familiar knock on my door. It was Alex, my neighbor's son, now in his mid-20s, someone I had watched grow up over the years. His presence always brought back memories of simpler days, watching him play outside as a boy, and somehow, over the years, an unspoken closeness had developed between us. Nothing inappropriate, at least. I had always believed so, but it was warm, effortless, and comforting. That evening, he came over claiming he needed some advice about college and life decisions. We talked about classes, career options, and ambitions, just like we always did. But then, out of nowhere, he asked me something personal, something I wasn't prepared for. His voice was hesitant, almost nervous, and he looked me directly in the eyes as he asked, "Have you ever felt lonely, really lonely, even when you're with someone you love?" The question caught me off guard. I felt a rush of warmth, tinged with unease. Here was a young man, someone I had always seen as innocent and familiar, now probing into my private emotions. My first instinct was to brush it off, to give the casual answer that would keep things normal. But something in his gaze, vulnerable, sincere, and strangely knowing, made me pause. It was the kind of question that wasn't just about him seeking advice, it was about connecting, reaching into the quiet, hidden part of me that rarely spoke. I found myself speaking honestly, almost before I realized it. I admitted that yes, sometimes I did feel lonely, even in my marriage. I described the subtle ache of routine, of being seen but not always understood, of the quiet longing for someone to notice the little things about me. As I spoke, I felt exposed but also exhilarated. There was a dangerous thrill in sharing this truth with someone outside my marriage, someone who had always looked up to me in a way that didn't threaten my husband until now. Alex listened intently, nodding, his expression sympathetic yet respectful. But beneath the surface, I could sense a shift, an unspoken connection forming, fueled by emotional honesty and mutual understanding. It wasn't physical, not yet, but it was intimate in a way that my marriage hadn't been in a long time. I realized, almost shockingly, how easily emotional infidelity could creep in. One question, one moment of honesty, had the power to open doors I hadn't thought to open, and once open, they were hard to close. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of conversation, laughter, and quiet confessions. I told myself it was harmless, that it was just a moment of vulnerability shared with someone I trusted. But deep down, I knew that something had shifted, lines had blurred, and a new emotional complexity had entered my life. That single question, simple yet profound, had changed the way I saw him, and the way I saw myself. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen, not as a wife, not as a mother, but as a woman with desires, fears, and emotions that no one else seemed to notice anymore. By the time Alex left that night, I was left with a mix of exhilaration, guilt, and a growing awareness of the dangerous terrain I was stepping onto. Emotional infidelity, I realized, wasn't about a single act or a physical betrayal, it was about the heart, the vulnerability, and the way attention and understanding could awaken feelings that had long been dormant. That night, I went to bed knowing one thing for certain: my answer had changed everything, not just between us, but inside me. It was a quiet evening, the kind where the soft hum of the city outside seemed almost distant, and I finally had a moment to myself. I had just finished making a cup of tea and settled into the living room, wrapped in a light robe, savoring the rare peace. The knock on the door was gentle but deliberate, and I knew immediately who it was: Alex, my neighbor's son. Over the years, I had watched him grow from a shy little boy playing in the yard to a young man now in his mid-20s, and our interactions had always carried a subtle warmth. Nothing inappropriate had ever happened, but there was a closeness, a comfort that came from years of familiarity and trust. He greeted me with a hesitant smile, holding a folder of papers, saying he needed advice on college applications and career paths. I motioned for him to sit, offering tea, and for a while, our conversation stayed casual, discussing schedules, classes, and potential internships. But as the minutes passed, I noticed a shift in his demeanor. He was quieter than usual, more introspective, and when he finally spoke, it was not about school or work. He asked me something personal, in a way that made me stop mid-breath. Have you ever felt lonely, even when you're with someone you love? The question struck me harder than I expected. It was intimate, unguarded, and it bypassed all small talk, going straight to a place I rarely admitted existed. My first reaction was surprise, mixed with a subtle edge of fear. Here was someone I had always considered like family, asking me to reveal the inner workings of my heart, the parts of me that were vulnerable, perhaps even fragile. I felt a rush of conflicting emotions: guilt, because it felt improper to share these things; curiosity, because it felt validating to be asked; and a strange warmth, because someone genuinely cared about what I felt. For a moment, I hesitated, unsure how to respond. Normally, I would have deflected, given a polite and distant answer, but his earnest gaze made me reconsider. It was clear he wasn't asking to manipulate or test me. He was seeking understanding, connection, and maybe even reassurance. As I spoke, the words came slowly, deliberately. I admitted that yes, there were moments of loneliness, times when life felt monotonous and my emotional needs seemed unnoticed. I described how it could feel isolating to be part of a marriage that was loving but routine, where the gestures of affection had become habitual rather than deeply connecting. I talked about longing for someone to notice the small details of who I was, the things that didn't get said aloud. As I opened up, I felt a complex mixture of liberation and unease. Sharing this truth with someone outside my marriage carried an unspoken risk, yet there was an undeniable relief in voicing feelings that had been quietly accumulating over the years. Alex listened intently, nodding, his expression reflective, conveying empathy without judgment. The intensity of the moment was disarming. The line between mentorship, friendship, and emotional intimacy seemed to blur with each word. His attentiveness, the way he made me feel heard and validated, was intoxicating. It reminded me of the kind of attention I hadn't received in a long time, not in the physical sense, but in the emotional sense, which often runs deeper and is harder to satisfy.